What is the key aspect that is commonly neglected by people creating?
I can tell you that right now it is very easy for someone with some experience in machine learning.
Ultimately, to build a solution, you need to have multiple parties come together, but that's not the way it works.
I started off writing video games. We did a lot of work for Disney Online. More famous games was about cows exploding and you had to milk them so it didn't blow up. Very grotesque.
We saw in the middle of last year this huge boom, which is now actually manifesting itself in regards to AI agents.
LLMs themselves, right as they are currently, there are strong limitations, but the next iteration is something that's similar, right?
In the early days of the internet, this is like the wild, wild west.
We not only just generated the image, right, but we also inferred and generated a three-dimensional portion.
As we are progressing in 2025 with, I would say, AI, we are just at the beginning.
The honest answer, I'm willing to admit, is I don't know.
Are they sufficient today? Do they exist?
No.
Hello, and welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Today, we dive into a critical and fascinating topic: design and adversarial uses of generative AI. I'm honored to host this conversation in collaboration with one of the world's leading research institutions, SRI International. This magical historical place deserves actually a quick introduction in itself. With deep roots in Silicon Valley, SRI International has led groundbreaking innovations for nearly 80 years, shaping industries from AI and robotics to cybersecurity and speech recognition. SRI pioneered voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, played a key role in graphical user interfaces, the Ethernet, and laser printers, and is also advancing machine learning and generative AI. Now today, I'm joined by Eric Yee, a computer scientist at SRI's Artificial Intelligence Center. Eric has applied machine learning across diverse fields, including natural language understanding, anomaly detection, and AI model competency analysis. More recently, he has led efforts exploring how generative AI can transform architectural design and expose vulnerabilities in AI systems. Let's dive into the future of AI and the risks we must address. I'm your host, Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, a longtime entrepreneur and corporate executive, living here in beautiful Silicon Valley for over 34 years, and the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. So let's get to it. Welcome everybody to, believe me or not, 2025. We are already in the new year, ready to roll. This is the first podcast of the year. I am here as always from Silicon Valley. This time I'm in Palo Alto, at the headquarters of SRI, the Stanford Research Institute. I'm sitting here with Eric Yee, and we talked a few months ago. We talked about AI. We talked about the amazing history of SRI. For some people who do not know anything about Stanford Research Institute, Eric will give a quick overview. And then we decided to talk a little bit about the design uses of generative AI and the adversarial uses of generative AI as it relates to deepfake stuff and cybersecurity. So from a not so deep engineering perspective, Eric, maybe you give us a quick overview of SRI, and then we get into the two topics that are close to your heart, and then we share a little bit of your very deep technical knowledge of what are you working on and where do you see opportunities as well as threats. So welcome to the podcast, and please tell us who is SRI and who are you as a person.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very honored. So I'm Eric Yee. I'm a computer scientist with SRI. So yes, it does stand for Stanford Research Institute. But since we separated from Stanford in 1970, we're technically not allowed to say the name of they who shall not be named. Otherwise, we get in a lot of legal.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Okay. So SRI started off as a research institute, primarily founded after World War II, aimed at addressing the world's problems. That's what the mission statement says. What we really do is we take in a lot of research and development contracts across a broad range of different technologies. So I'm more familiar with the more notable items that we've created. So think of the mother of all demos that Doug Engelbart and the Augment Lab have put together. So there was a very ambitious effort to, I guess, improve the ability of humans to collaborate. So a lot of modern technologies like the computer mouse, like most famously,
Yeah.
and a lot of the graphical user interface and whole other slew of innovations came out of that. Other ones included, if you remember to the era of paper checks, that strange font that they have over
Mhm.
there. That was developed by that. SRI has also been known for doing things like policy-related work, such as like identifying where to put Disney World. Apparently, that was a huge coup, and so far it's been a great success. At least personally in my own timeline, it's nice to we also saw the development of Siri.
Mhm.
So you can certainly lay the blame at yelling at your smartphone or that device that's sitting on the desk, partly on SRI as well.
Interesting.
Yep.
So I remember the stories of SRI as it relates particularly to the famous development of the mouse,
Yes.
right? And obviously with Bill Gates being here a long time ago and then Steve Jobs with the graphical user interface, I guess.
Yes.
So that made history. So I'm very honored to be in these particular buildings. And for our listeners or viewers, I'm personally only aware of the tech museum that we have in Mountain View. I obviously spent many years at Intel. Intel has its own museum in R&B in the main Robert Noyce building. But SRI, there's so much history here that both buildings in Menlo Park and in Palo Alto, you actually also have in the main entrances, you have a museum based on the technologies that came out of this particular, interesting environment. So very honored to be here. Maybe you explain us a little bit in a few sentences how deep and what you are working on based on your background. And then we go a little bit more deeper into
Mm,
the topics of generative AI. But like if I meet you in an elevator and then it would, who are you?
mm.
What are you working on? What's your background and what qualifies you to actually talk about these topics?
So yeah, I'm a nominally computer scientist. So actually, I started off as a natural language processing person, but like physicists, we tend to get a repurposed to do applied machine learning. So, which is actually kind of where I got placed. A lot of that work actually gravitated towards generative methods very early on, mostly because there's quite a bit of potential in them, even a couple of years back. And as we've seen, it's been the way they've blossomed is really quite amazing and kind of a nice validation of where I wanted to be. But it's also interesting because these classes of methods, right, being able to sort of reconstruct the world and imagine where the world could be, it has a lot of applications. So personally, I would say applied machine learning mostly because we take a lot of these concepts and reapply them in multiple domains. So it's not just, let's say, engineering or architectural design. I've also worked in biology and also just in cell phone networks and just a very number of different domains. So
As it relates to artificial intelligence.
yes.
Okay. How long have you worked on the topic of artificial intelligence?
So, yes. So this also goes back to my background as well. So I've been a computer scientist for about I think 12 years now, and before that I was a software engineer. So I actually went to grad school while I was working here. No
Okay.
pro tip: don't ever do that. If anyone was considering, just do grad school.
Okay.
Before that, I'm afraid my background is a bit unusual. I started off writing video games. We did a lot of work for Disney Online. One of my more famous games was about cows exploding, and you had to milk them so it didn't blow up. Very grotesque. Probably wonder how I ended up over here.
Yeah.
Yes, mostly because I'd experienced in some certain software packages that were useful for working on some of the software decision support tools that we were working on. And I think a great thing about someplace like SRI is it's very much like a university, as you've seen from our campus, and also the fact that you have just gobs of really smart people around. Like, I mean, there was one guy like down the hallway who was involved in some of the first internet transmissions and then maintaining the namespaces after that.
So by definition, this research organization here is like years ahead of certain trends before they even mature, I would. I would say. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, the sanity of that or the validity, of course, like with any other group of people who are peering into the future, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always, you never know. But yes, I think that's a good
Okay.
characterization.
Okay. So let's dive into a few of these things because out of a research institute, I would actually like to hear some opinions that are forward looking in some sense. So let's talk a little bit about the design uses of generative AI. And this encompasses some of our experiences with using generative AI for design tasks such as architectural designs. So, what is the key aspect that is commonly neglected by people creating generative AI aimed at design tasks?
Quite frankly, so the answer is actually very similar to applying any new technology towards any new task. Is namely, are you actually addressing a problem the users actually want? I can tell you that right now it is very easy for someone with some experience in machine learning to look at a problem domain and say, have I got a solution for you? I'm going to take your outputs and then run them, and then generate more of them, right? Or say, hey, this is really cool. You can do this. So in our case, our design task was to create an architectural facade. So these are the exterior of buildings, and the original intent was, hey, could we perhaps like inspire creativity or explore different design styles for architects. So while it's exciting for us, for those of us who understand very little about architecture, it turns out that architects' pain point, especially in the early ideation phases, isn't actually coming up with interesting designs. Because remember, these are very creative people. They have no problems coming up with ideas. Their main thing is coming up with ideas that they can bound within a specific cost and then be able to then pitch them to their clients.
Yeah.
So being able, you need to modulate, you need to adjust your solution to actually meet what they actually want. Age old truism, but we need to be constantly reminded of that. So as an
So,
example,
so
yes,
with that, so with that in mind, if I'm taking an architectural design as an example and trying to apply AI, the majority of the listeners most likely are AI savvy as it relates to large language models and ChatGPT. I mean, the last year and a half is all about OpenAI and ChatGPT, right? But yours goes much deeper and it goes much more like applied AI industrial use cases.
yes.
So, how for our listeners, what's the difference and where do you have that thinking where this is not ChatGPT, you put something in a text and then something, being thrown back at you. This seems to be much more complex as it relates to physics, architectural design, mathematics, statics, all these kind of things. Are these the things that you need to be familiar with to do AI for these use cases?
Partially, I think. I mean, like any other good relationship, working relationship, it works. Yes, you do need to be aware of them, and then for us, it's also being able to adjust our solution. So for what we did was we not only just generated the image, right? But we also inferred and generated the three-dimensional portions of the facade of the neck
Okay.
from that.
Yeah.
And then you can do all the simulations, the heat, the lighting, the cost, and so on, right? And that's getting closer to what they want.
Okay.
But you did raise an interesting second point about what you need to know, right? Quite frankly, if I had to know everything about genetics, right? Say I'm working in protein, let's say proteinomics, right? If I can't possibly know everything about that, and then try to learn about architecture as well.
Right. Right.
I mean, I think and I also seen this a lot, also in a lot of machine learning types, is having the humility to one find someone who does know what they're talking about and listening to them and trying to understand what they're trying to do, and then you can come to a common agreement about what would be appropriate and useful for them.
Got it. Okay. So makes sense. So
Well,
for every use case, there's an expert. In this case, it would be an architect.
yes,
An architect is not a programmer for machine languages, but you are, and you are not the architects. So ultimately, to build a solution, you need to have multiple parties come together
yes,
and very much align and define the expectation before, you throw some data, Excel sheets, whatever, to a machine learning guy, and then they're on their own. That's not the way it works.
yes. But comments. I'll also argue it's actually getting to that. If you get to the point where you have everyone together at a table, right, and then they're starting to basically be technical, like put stuff mathematically into, let's say, a spreadsheet or on the
Yeah.
whiteboard, right? That's perfect. Getting everyone together to the table first in good faith is probably the trickiest thing I have ever encountered. in any of the projects I've worked on. Experts are experts and they believe they know everything. It's not just doctors, right? It's everyone. And being able to sort of crack that shell and then get in there and say, we could possibly help you. Can you understand, right? Let help me understand like what it is you need, right? Then it's tricky.
Got
Then
it.
it can start working.
Okay. So what does creativity mean in the age of generative AI mediated designs? Rephrasing that a little bit. If you have an architect, or I'll use another example, somebody wants to design an airplane or a car or anything that is like physical, out of the physical world that we know. Then what creativity mean when it comes to the expected output, the old way people have done it before, and how does AI in the middle actually accelerate or enhances these efforts? Because there has to be a gain and a value add for AI, otherwise I could live without it.
Yes. Certainly we are seeing this in multiple domains. I think that in particular with LLMs, because language is quite broad and flexible, and we've seen a lot of adoptance there. But to get to the core of the question, what does creativity actually mean? Well, how does this impact what we mean by creative? The honest answer, which I'm willing to admit, is I don't know. We really do not know how this is going to shake out. If you look at, and I would say my bet would be is the place that you would want to look at would be where the money goes, in particular litigation.
Mhm.
And because ultimately that's about dictating, who gets assigned which resources and how we as a society, essentially attribute ownership of specific ideas, creative ideas. How AI fits into that, that's probably gonna be where that falls out, at least for that specific problem. Now, identity as a human being,
Yeah.
that's potentially worrisome maybe in a couple of years, but right now, that's not really something I feel equipped to answer.
So on a side note, if I look back 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago, I mean, AI has been around, as we know, for many, many years with, DeepMind in the 2010 area or in 2014. But pretty much everybody now at this point should know about large language models, OpenAI, and similar models. And the use cases are fairly easy, right? You put text in, you get text out. Then we saw in the middle of last year this huge boom, which is now actually manifesting itself in regards to AI agents. So everybody now predicts, I think it was Andreessen Horowitz or somebody says there's going to be 2 billion individual AI agents out there in a couple of years, and they will talk to each other without any human being interactions. So there's that, and then there is applied AI. Now, I am a very true believer in the money is actually a lot in the applied AI sector, because that's where you have industries, you have vertical industry segmentations, you have real life examples, you have the physical world, you have things that needs to be built, that needs to be better built or faster, more cost effective. But looking at that, and you guys are always a few steps ahead, years ahead. What comes after that? Do you already have an idea or something that you can share, or we don't know yet? It's too early to say.
Well, I can certainly ask the psychics. We were famed notoriously for our psychic research program too.
Okay, seriously?
Seriously.
Okay.
My speculation is they're still in the basement somewhere.
Okay. So, but that the department exists and they are looking into a glass ball to define it.
Well, I would say that's a prop necessary, but no, but seriously, some of the speculation is yes. I mean, the speculation about using the following agents and kind of following this trajectory. These are following age old cycles in AI, right? Like there was like about like 20, 30 years ago, there was a huge trend in using agents in agentic architectures. And actually, if you look at a lot of the agentic and cognitive architectures that they're using now. So these are cognitive, meaning they imitate the way humans work. We have a memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, different perceptions, and so on, right?
Mhm.
And even kind of a different, like a theory of mind and
Yeah.
such. These all essentially mimic the trends and things people had explored ages ago. So at least I think to us, this isn't necessarily anything that that new, I guess. Now the impact, I do agree, the impact because the latest version of AI is they're way more performant. But the impact, like where these effects go, because they're one, they work, and two, they're going to be deployed at scale. So the impact of that, it's going to be amazing. But the thing that's next, and I'm allowed to speculate, right?
Yeah,
No matter how
of course.
crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. All
This
right.
is a research institute, so you can
Okay.
speculate.
Yeah. So the thing I find personally very interesting and also slightly disturbing as a human being is there's a lot of interest because LLMs are so lifelike, and the idea is to try to use them to start imitating people. So think of persona cloning, right? Like I have, let's say, the transcript of all, let's say presidential speeches, right? Let's say President Clinton, for example, for a recent one. And then I have also records of his behavior too. And the idea would be is, okay, I've got this stack of all this stuff about him. Could I maybe take an LLM, right? And then try to have it imitate him.
Yep.
And then, well, besides for amusement purposes, could I possibly, try to learn more about him that way? So the idea that you could sort of clone someone, right? Now, how well you can do it, how well we truly understand what the foundations of personality are, I have strong issues with this entire, at least some of the assumptions people are going in, right? But then again, technology, we're ambitious.
Yeah.
But if you look at the trajectory, right, and the fact that we want to do this, right? Well, LLMs themselves, right, as they are currently, there are strong limitations, but the next iteration of something that's similar, right? Maybe it imitates our connectome, the brain patterns instead, the connections, right? And then from there, right, it becomes kind of more lifelike and more realistic, right? And at some point, it's going to get to a point we are creating things that are very much more closer to us in terms of behavior and such. So then the implications of that then become a bit stranger, I think.
Particularly if you cannot differentiate between what's real and what is not, and what false and what is true.
That's true. I mean,
That brings us to the next question, which is, and I know you're very passionate about it, which is about deepfake detection, but also cybersecurity.
oh yeah.
And that's definitely a big topic. So, moving to the next one, which is the adversarial usage of generative AI. Um, and for example, what are the current developments in generative AI that we should start being concerned about as potential threats?
Mm. So yes, my money would be on cybersecurity concerns. Now, a year ago, I would not have said that. I would have said this is an emerging area. But just the developments I've seen in the first half 2024, and then some other major ones at the end of last year, tell me that the cyber landscape is probably going to change very dramatically. The reason is that LLMs they're trained on our written material primarily, right? And a large chunk of our written material is source code and also things that are cyber primary and things that have an impact in the cyber world. So, for example, there's a competition called the AI Cyber Challenge. The idea here is like you will try to get an AI to find vulnerabilities and maybe craft an exploit and target the computer systems that's trying to break into them. There was one system out of the competition, Team Atlanta, I believe, that was able to find a novel vulnerability inside a SQL, inside a database,
Okay.
and this was replicated by a couple of we can call them 0 day researchers at Google, Project Zero. Similarly, the other thing is that there's also another effort that is using code understanding LLMs to examine source code for open source projects and identifying bugs in them preemptively. And then like identifying potential areas and then taking the existing testing, well, we call them fuzzing, right? But they're testing tools to aim it at these pieces of software and then identify whether it is a vulnerability or not. And both have actually, yes, a lot of security people kind of may downplay the results. They say these may be kind of pedestrian. But on the other hand, at the beginning of last year, we didn't have systems that could really do that. At the end of that year, we believe these have been performed so well that we almost take them as granted, and then we're saying, "Hey, go work on the next big problem in that area." It-
So, in general, are all companies who are developing AI models or whatever there is, are there regulations? Are there standards? Are there sufficient tools out there already today to make sure everything fits certain cybersecurity standards? Or at the moment, because everything is moving so fast that it's, like in the early days of the internet, this is like the wild, wild
Mhm.
west. And based on your examples right now, this sounds scary for the next couple of years. If not everybody has the same latest tools
Mhm.
to make sure whatever they develop, particularly on models, particularly if it's open source, then throwing it out there and, stuff can happen.
Let's see. There's two facets to this question. First of all, is at least in the near term, I believe the existing frameworks in thinking and threat modeling for cyber threats, including kind of the at least in the United States the common law in like legal infrastructure that we have, right? I believe that it should cover a lot of cases. A lot of these capabilities, they actually kind of map back to things we have experienced before. Even if you have like a threat actor, like scale up their abilities to perform, right? I mean, I could use an AI to fish, but it's still phishing, right? And then
Mhm.
you can attribute blame to the person who's instigating it. Now, the other issue is that if the use of an AI presents it's another surface to attack, right? And we've all seen kind of these famous examples of someone talking to a chatbot wrong, and that chatbot, you've got a free vacation to Tahiti.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. So that so that tends to be what people are talking about putting guardrails in to get AIs to be aligned, meaning there's an understanding about what's appropriate and what's not.
But are they sufficient today? Do they exist?
No, they are. Yeah,
Do you as a leading research institution see a role to help guiding these efforts? Or that's really not in your scope?
no, it is. I mean, it is in our interest because these technologies, they are great, they're wonderful, and no one truly understands why they work, how they work, right? I mean, it's literally, quite literally, just next word prediction, like like the word completion you see in email. I mean, fundamentally, it's that simple task. But yet, because of the complexities of language, you're able to get some amazing inferential capabilities out of there. And I mean, my personal hope is that maybe we can do some kind of like the physics or the calculus of how knowledge is interpolated both in language and through these. That would be very ambitious, and hopefully someone pay for that. Yes. But then the second item would be is, I mean, a true guardrail is difficult because what we mean by like allowable behavior, right, or bad behavior in one instance is going to be very different from another use case. So think of hallucinations. That's a very common one, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in certain cases, you do want hallucinations. Think of creative writing or brainstorming, ideation. You want to come up with, A plus B equals C, where C is something I've never observed in my training data. On the other hand, there are other cases, say, like the customer service chatbot, where I do not want to come up with any answer that doesn't match anything I've been told is correct. So hallucinations, it's interesting phenomena, but it's too big, too broad. And I think one of the things that institutions like ours can help is to map out this space. So, I mean, it's like, if you recall that Donald Rumsfeld, right, the unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah.
And he confused everyone,
Yeah.
right? The idea there is really to say, okay, we are in the dark, right? And we're fumbling around, but we try to figure out what are the things we could bump into. Then we can start figuring out how we can find them. So mapping this space out. What do we actually mean by hallucination? What do we mean by aligned? That's something I think that we severely need to work on.
That's an interesting example, and I never thought about of hallucination to be a good thing.
Hmm.
But if it's creatively forced for a certain outcome, then it's actually a feature and not a bug.
Yes.
Interesting. Um, so will deepfake detection technology protect us from misinformation and misuse? I mean, we just went through an election. In Europe, there are multiple elections going on right now. Actually, in the world, I think last year we had more elections on the planet in one year than ever before.
And more billionaires involved in elections too.
Yeah, yeah, let's not go there, but yes, you are absolutely correct. But coming back to the cybersecurity and deepfakes, so the detection technology, do they at the moment protect us from misinformation and misuse
Hmm.
today? Will they protect us from these things tomorrow? Or is it actually a fact that we have to live with it in the foreseeable future and years to come? Which, man, that's hard to imagine for me, but that's how it looks like today.
Yeah. Okay, so answering near term, whether our current mechanisms are good enough, detecting them, maybe, but getting people to accept whether or not this is a deep fake or not, no. Even prior to the boom in a lot of the generative image generation technologies, there was a prior program that Adversarial was involved in to try to identify when someone was photoshopping something.
Hmm.
And even back then, we found examples of something that was very clearly Photoshop, but because it's confirmation bias, humans are flawed in the way we think. Because of that, people still accepted it. It was very clear. The president is not on the Zodiac raft trying to hand out for like a meal ready to eat to someone being swept away into the ocean. No, that didn't happen. But yet people saw that and I confirmed their beliefs. So
It's hard to draw a line between what's real and what's not.
it's because people do not want that line drawn for them. They see something that they can latch on to. We can tell them all the multiple ways this image has been manipulated, and we can even now maybe, right? It's still doable in many respects. But the technology is getting better. Similarly with writing, right? It's really hard to tell whether something was written by a human or by an AI some form. Yes, and then yeah. Well, sorry. Go ahead.
So
Mhm.
when I have a side question about SRI. So you guys get a lot of funding from the government, right, for individual projects, certain, I don't know, development simulations, whatever. At the same time, is the government coming to you or government regulation bodies to also for you to help them with, setting rules, standards, and things like that?
Occasionally, yes. So it's not just AI. So what our government does is we like to joke about the government, right? Deep state or whatever, right? But I mean, it really, in my experience with them, they really are very motivated and they are also very smart and they recognize when there are potential threats or implications, usually ahead of time. For example, one of our funding agencies, DARPA, right?
Mm-hmm.
They they have anticipated a lot of kind of needs, like literally like 5 to 10 years before they hit. Similarly with IARPA, right? And a similar one, they also recognize all these threats. So think of think of the deepfake issue, right? Even way back in the mid 2010s, they recognized that the potential societal effect of these, and they started a program to try to detect these. So they do approach us to they have these open calls to address specific concerns that are upcoming, like 5 years and out. There's also invitations to go speak with different agencies and just essentially consult with them, or even just we actually do we do a lot of gratis work for them as well. We'll just go over and talk with them, speak our opinions, and hopefully be heard.
Okay. I leave it with that. We are actually right on time, which is perfect. So thank you very much. I am pleased that you guys invited me to come over here. I was not aware, although I have been here for a very long time, how deep the history is of SRI when it comes to world-changing technologies that all of us take for granted today. Somebody had to thought about it way back when, and it happened in these buildings here. So again, I'm very honored to be here. And as we are progressing in 2025 with, I would say, AI, we are just at the beginning. And I would be delighted to come back and have another round of an interview in a year from now. Let's see what happens in the next 12 months. And then let's see if you can predict the future even further. So, with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much in sharing some insights with our audience.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye.